you look at the errors. The first one is horrendous. The second one is just beyond belief. It's a really strange display.
He is football's worst loser, Virgil Van Dijk. He's the modern day Roy Keane, Virgil Van Dijk. I'd imagine he's an absolute nightmare to be playing with because he just moans all the time.
This whole narrative that's developing about, oh, well, it could have been so much better this season. Make no mistake, if Liverpool win the league, that's an enormous achievement that not many people saw coming.
If they had a bit more cutting edge, City were there for the taking.
Manchester City were dreadful yesterday. There's a bit of an apathy in that team, and you saw that from their performance because their standards have dropped so dramatically.
It does strike you as strange that the team that he picked, Pep Guardiola.
But that lack of dynamism is a real problem. They are nowhere near where they need to be, but they know that.
It feels like a long way back for Manchester City. It looks like a massive rebuild job. And how do you replace players of that calibre? And the big issue for United is the top end of the pitch. Højlund was really disappointing. Garnacho isn't an inverted forward. It's a big concern, the lack of goals. They've got to get a proper number 9. I'd sign Victor Osimhen. I think he's the cheapest option available. I think he will score goals in the Premier League. Go and get him.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, talkSPORT's chief football correspondent Alex Crook and international football expert Kevin Hatchard. Now, Liverpool's lacklustre performance, the Manchester snooze fest, a forgettable West London derby and a tame Spurs performance against the worst team in Premier League history, coupled with the spring sunshine, was yesterday the biggest indication yet that the end of the season is nigh, Crook.
Yeah, I think so. We had the misfortune of sitting through that dull as dishwater derby at Old Trafford. It looked like two teams who knew the game didn't really have anything huge riding on it. Obviously, it was a similar story, as you mentioned, in the Brentford-Chelsea game. The first half of the game I watched at West Ham on Saturday was equally dire. And unfortunately, because the relegation picture is already sorted, because we know Liverpool are going to be champions and Arsenal are guaranteed to finish in the top 4, in terms of these dead rubber games, I think we're going to have to sit through a lot of those between now and the end of the season.
There was a conversation between us and a few sort of luminaries of the broadcasting and press world yesterday. We carried that discussion on to air, and it was carried on by Alan Pardew, actually, who was a little bit concerned about the product, possession-based football becoming vogue. To counter that, transitional direct teams then sit in a low block, strike on the break, and they've sort of developed over time to try and counteract the possession-based football. That means large periods, Kevin, of attack versus defence, which if we're not careful of, it could end up resembling international football. And league domination, we know, is cyclical. Is there the same concerns in the Bundesliga, or in Germany are the thoughts sort of lending themselves to, hold on a minute, the world's footballing power could be shifting out of the Premier League centre?
Yeah, I think if you look at Germany, it's a transitional league by nature. So it's always been quite counter-attack heavy. Pep Guardiola did change it when he arrived at Bayern, and I think a lot of coaches looked at him and looked at what could be achieved with that kind of football and tried to copy it, tried to change the way they play. But actually, that league has always been really heavily based on transitions. And you look at teams like Leipzig in recent years, they've taken that to the extreme with that high press. I think with the Premier League, there's a bit of a mix, because I think what you're getting is you are getting a fair few dull games. But I think actually you're also getting some quite bright coaches in the league as well. I think if you look at what Andoni Iraola has done, yes, his players have been run into the ground, and I think that's what you're seeing now. I think you're seeing fatigue kicking in, but he's trying to do some interesting things. I think Thomas Frank has done a brilliant job in terms of getting the most out of his players, and he's unashamed, really, in the way he approaches it. He's quite happy to be direct at times. But yeah, I think some of the big hitters, it's very much about what they do without the ball. And you look at Arsenal, that's absolutely the case. I don't think that's been the case with Liverpool. I think they've just declined in the last few weeks. But in general, they've been quite front foot.
I think if we probably analyse statistics, I mean, I got the calculator out this morning and worked out that there's been 907 goals scored in 308 games so far. That's 2.94 goals per game, which right now is on course for the highest scoring season in Premier League history. But it's not just about goals, is it? It's not just about more. It's about dramatic matches. It's about edge of your seat entertainment. Has there been enough of that? I mean, English football is about Manchester United, Liverpool last season in the FA Cup. That's what sort of symbolise it to me. There are flashes. Fulham, Liverpool in the first half yesterday. Exactly what you want to see. I mean, Arne Slot was absolutely furious about that first half. He absolutely hated it. He liked the second half of the game when there was a lot more control and it was a lot more dull. Aston Villa Forest, Saturday night. That's the game I want to see. Two teams going at one another. Some matches are just far too easy. Tottenham against Southampton. It was dull. You watch it back and you just think, it was just far too simple for Tottenham. VAR checks going on for 5 minutes at a time, killing momentum in football matches. I think we've got to be really careful because I know that football in this country needed more professionalism. It needed more more intricate coaching. Definitely, they needed to upscale the skills on offer. We know that. But are we in danger of sucking the passion out of the game and the drama out of the game, Crook?
Yeah, I thought about this on my journey home last night, and I tweeted about it when I got in, and I mentioned it on air. I think for me, the big problem that football has is that there's too much data involved in the game now. You look at the way that players are recruited, Exhibit A being Chelsea. You look at the sports scientists. I know one Premier League player came off with 20 minutes to go at the weekend, even though he felt he was fit enough to see out the 90. But the sports scientists were telling the management team, actually, look, he's in that red zone. We need to get him off.
The radar was blinking.
Exactly, and even the way the game plays out is a lot controlled by data. You see all the analysts sat up with us in the press box, and I think the maverick nature out of the game and players actually making big decisions for themselves on the pitch and taking accountability has been removed to a large extent. That Manchester derby being a classic case, we said it midway through the second half. Manchester City were dreadful yesterday. They were there for the taking. But United's performance was so methodical, so rigid to the way that Ruben Amorim wants his team to play. Actually, if there was someone out there who just took the game by the scruff of the neck and did something off the cuff, that might have been enough to win it.
Yeah, but that's really specific to Amorim right now, right? I get that. But the thing is, if you look at his sporting teams, he would have, players who were unpredictable. He would have Trincao doing things. He would have Gonçalves doing things. He would have Marcus Edwards at times doing things. Gyökeres obviously has, come up with a fair bit of magic with all the goals that he scored. I think Amorim's in a really specific mode right now where he's looking around and he's thinking, right, I have to get the basics right and then I have to build on that. So, but the problem is, in general, with the data thing, I understand that argument, but it's a £1 billion business. And these guys involved don't like trusting stuff to luck, don't like trusting stuff to intangibles. They want to lock down everything they see. Now, I don't think that's necessarily always a good thing. And I think there's room for mavericks and there's room for unpredictable players. I come back to Bournemouth again. It's been great to see Kluivert, Semenyo, guys like that who are quite, they are game changers. They can come up with something unusual. Anthony Gordon, I think, is a good example as well at Newcastle. But this is the consequence of the commercialization of the sport. And nowhere is it more commercialized than the Premier League.
But it isn't a $1 billion industry. It's a game. And if you take the game out of the sport, then unfortunately it won't be a $1 billion industry for much longer. You've got to have that drama. You've got to have that edge of your seat stuff because that is what makes it the $1 billion industry in the first place. If you don't recognize that level of entertainment is required in order to capture people, then you're going to see a drop-off in viewership, which I think, when we're concerned about this, we're already starting to see. Silence is golden. Maybe that is the case. Even these two have dropped off. You might think we're being dramatic, but it's a concern in footballing circles anyway. It doesn't matter. Let's get stuck into the action itself. Craven Cottage is the place we're going to start. Fulham managed to ruffle a few liver bird feathers. Fulham 3, Liverpool 2. Following Arsenal's draw on Saturday, Liverpool had the perfect opportunity to extend their lead and put any doubts to bed. I think they've probably done that anyway. Look, I thought Fulham played really well right from the very off. They probably should have had a penalty, Kevin, in the first couple of minutes.
Yeah, they should have. I think that's fair to say. That challenge on Pereira, I think, should have been. But look, I thought Liverpool, it was just a really odd performance, actually. You look at the errors, The first one is horrendous, like a really poor touch straight back across his own goal in the penalty area. The second one is just beyond belief. I mean, the pass from Robertson across his own goal, and then all of the kind of Benny Hill nonsense that followed it in trying to make the block. I mean, it was just...
much of which involved Andrew Robertson.
Yes, absolutely. So that was bizarre to see. And then, actually, I know it's gone down and is being talked about as an error, the third goal. It's a great touch over the top. I know Van Dijk needs a ticket to get back into the stadium, but it's a lovely touch to take it behind Muniz and to finish. But yeah, it was a really strange display, and people will talk about tiredness. They'll talk about, the fact that a little bit of intensity's gone out of Liverpool. I think that's fair to say. The second half was much, much better. Harvey Elliott was unlucky not to get the equaliser. Tried to bend it in that top corner, hit the frame of the goal. But, it wasn't a great display. But I think this whole narrative that's developing about, it could have been so much better this season. Make no mistake, if Liverpool win the league, that's an enormous achievement that not many people saw coming. And league titles have been pretty thin on the ground for Liverpool in recent decades.
Totally
so
agree.
They will absolutely take them wherever they find them. And I think, however they do it, if they do it, it's been a phenomenal effort all season.
Yeah, I mean, the overarching view about Premier League and exporting it to the rest of the world and it maintaining its position as the number one league in the world is not an attack on Liverpool's football. Liverpool have been fantastic. Liverpool have done the job that has been required of them. I think we've been let down by everybody else, but Liverpool have done a brilliant job, and Arne Slot in particular, who has been a major asset, I think, to the Premier League, because he's so calm, he's so composed, he's so charming when you speak to him. He's seamlessly slotted into the league. Brilliant, it's fantastic. But Liverpool themselves could afford to take their foot off the gas because Arsenal haven't stood up to them as much as they might have done this season, nor of City, nor of Chelsea, nor of Manchester United, and Tottenham are languishing in the bottom half of the table. I think that Van Dijk error was smacked of casualness to me. It was like he didn't even look in his wing mirrors to see if Rodrigo Muniz was behind him because, he was almost on a Sunday stroll, wasn't he, like the rest of them?
Yeah, I quite enjoy seeing Virgil van Dijk make a mistake, to be honest, because he's a grumpy isn't he? Let's be honest. I mean, he is football's worst loser, Virgil van Dijk. He had a pop at Michael Owen in midweek for no particular reason. And
I thought that was justified, actually. I was all for that. Yeah, I was all for that. But again, that ties into what I've just said about that narrative that, Liverpool were in the mix for all these trophies and, you're only going to win the league. No.
He's the modern day Roy Keane, Virgil van Dijk. I'd imagine he's an absolute nightmare to be playing with because he just moans all the time, doesn't he? So as I say,
that mean he's going to be a brilliant pundit?
When he's culpable for a goal, I quite enjoy it. Do you remember I told you a few weeks ago, and you mocked me, Sam? You mocked me. You pointed out his numbers, that Mo Salah every season hits a bit of a flat spot. Well, he's certainly hitting a flat spot at the moment, isn't he, Mo Salah?
Hold on a second. I didn't mock you. I just pointed out his numbers. And at the time, his numbers were great. His numbers are not great. I actually grabbed hold of you yesterday when you were not busy watching the football. You were doing something else on your phone. I think you were watching a horse race or something. And I said, you've got to see this. You've got to see this. You're like, well, okay, whatever. And I was like, no, watch it. And it was the moment when that arcing, beautiful cross comes in from the left-hand side and it dissects the Fulham back line and picks out Mo Salah at the far post. And he shanks it over the bar. I mean, I think it went and bobbled into the river behind the Putney end. It was such a bad finish. And he did nothing in the game, Kevin, yesterday, did he?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. I think there's a little bit of variance. I think it's so unsustainable to hit the numbers he's hit all the way through the season. So it's just natural there's going to be a dip. But I also think when you look at his season, there has to be an element of context about how much of Liverpool's play is geared towards him. I think if you look at some of the other players in that forward line, there is rightly a deference to him. There is, and Arne Slot's talked about this from time to time this season. So much of that attack, the end point is Salah at the cost of other players. That's not Salah being selfish. That's not Salah being greedy. They've just gone, he's the best forward, get him the ball. So that's the way it works. And when Liverpool aren't quite firing, as they haven't been in recent games, that makes it much more difficult for him because he's not getting that service. He's not quite getting that rhythm. And I think that's partially the reason for that drop-off. But I mean, you're talking about, the most phenomenal level for most of the season and then just that dip. So I don't think that's a huge worry.
No, absolutely. And he hasn't had to worry because they can now get the cigars out, puff away gently to the end of the season and cruise like they're on a little riverboat going down the Thames because they are so far ahead. And they're so far ahead because of Arsenal's failure to convert draws into wins. I think Arsenal still had their own problems this season. They've had lots of injuries. They've thrown away points they shouldn't have done, but they've lacked a goal scorer, which has been their big issue. We'll talk about them in just a moment. But they will go on and win the title. And when they do win the title, I'm sure Kevin will celebrate with gusto. He'll be there at Anfield with his arms up in the air, thrusting a makeshift silver trophy. Will you make a sort of tin foil Premier League, will you, that day?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah, why not?
I'll get
Why
the
not?
kids
You
to do
should.
it. Yeah.
No, do it yourself. Don't be such. Don't be such.
I'll outsource
Such
it. I'll outsource
a
it.
taskmaster. Outrageous. Right, okay, let's move on to some of the other performances this weekend, starting at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Well, we were on air yesterday after Tottenham 3, Southampton 1. And usually, Sunday is a day for basically the Tottenham confessional. We open the phone lines. The Tottenham fans are largely upset about something that has happened. But yesterday, I wasn't expecting that many Tottenham callers. And the reason I wasn't expecting Tottenham callers was because they won 3-1, right? Okay, the sun was out, everyone's happy. They won 3-1. Brennan Johnson scored 2 goals. However, they weren't happy, were they, Crook? The Tottenham fans that rang us were absolutely furious because of what we're saying again. They didn't get out of second gear in that game. Now, maybe that's because Southampton are really poor. In fact, one of the poorest teams that's ever played in the Premier League, and they've been relegated earlier than anybody else. But the Tottenham fans were not enamoured by the performance of the team, and I think that's a worry going forward into their 2 huge matches against Frankfurt.
Yeah, the second half in particular seemed to be what they had most issue with. They felt Spurs took their foot off the gas. They felt there was an opportunity to score. I think one guy said they could have scored 9 goals if they kept playing against this utterly abysmal Southampton team. We'll talk about the reasons for their relegation in a moment. But I'm not sure that many Spurs fans came away from that game with much more confidence they're going to get past Frankfurt. Kev will probably be able to give us the perspective on them. Certainly their form has tailed off since Marmoush left for Manchester City, but they're still riding high in the Bundesliga. And I haven't looked at the odds yet, but I'd imagine that the bookies have got Tottenham as favourites. I'm not sure they should be.
Yeah, Kev, who are Frankfurt? What are Frankfurt? Their manager, Top Muller, is particularly impressive. He's got a tune out of this team. They're 3rd in the Bundesliga as we speak. They haven't had the best of second halves of the season, but they're still very competitive, aren't they? I was reading an article last night about them saying that actually, do you know what? They can cause anyone problems on their day.
Yeah, they can. And you're right to mention Dino Tuchmuller, the coach, because he's one of the most highly rated coaches in Germany. Speak to a lot of guys who've worked with him, and all of them say what a great tactical mind he is, but also really good motivator too. His dad was a coach as well, used to be a coach of Bayer Leverkusen, and nearly won the Champions League with them. So really smart guy at the top of the club. Marcus Krösche, who's the sporting director, also really smart guy, has brought in some great young players. They've been very good at flipping talent, bringing it in like Marmoush, and then developing it and selling it for big money. And that's worked out for them. And it's allowed them to put together a squad of very good young players, guys like Ugo Ekitike, who's been scoring lots of goals. He's trying to take the mantle of Marmoush. I think they've really missed Marmoush, but of course they would. City fans have seen already how effective he can be. Scores goals, makes goals, takes corners, takes free kicks, takes penalties, the whole lot. So you lose a guy like that who scored 20 goals for you in all competitions, there's going to be a correction. There's going to be an adjustment. But I think because they are so front foot, because they're so energetic, because they've got guys with a bit of, street smarts like Mario Götze, if Tottenham aren't at it, they can absolutely cause them problems over the 2 legs.
So give me a player that is going to cause them real issues.
Well, I think Ekitike, because Ekitike's got that ability to get in behind a high line. He's a really unusual player. He can make these slaloming runs. He's quite a tall guy, but he's got rangy stride. He hasn't been scoring in the league recently. He came close against Bremen at the weekend. but he's a real danger. And they've got pace out wide as well. They've got guys like Nathaniel Brown, Namdi Collins will burst forward from the fullback positions. Rasmus Christensen, who was at Leeds, is having a good season. But also one to watch out for is Hugo Larsson, who's a Swedish midfielder and plays, way beyond his years. Very young guy, but has a real steel about him, takes responsibility, great energy in midfield. Yeah, they've got plenty of ways they can hurt Tottenham. But I spoke to people at Frankfurt recently about this game. They have a very healthy respect for Tottenham. They don't fear Spurs, but they respect the quality that they have in that team.
Interesting. Brennan Johnson is their top scorer this season, Tottenham Hotspur. Why did he not take a penalty when at the end of the game when he had the opportunity to complete his hat-trick? Crook?
Well, only he can answer that. I guess Matthias Tell yet to really fire since joining on deadline day in quite a protracted transfer. So maybe they just wanted to get him, feeling the back of the net in the Premier League. But yeah, it's a strange one that when you're on penalties, maybe this comes back to the data again and the lack of players thinking for themselves. And imagine that Matthias Tell was already down to take a penalty before the game, and they've not taken into account the situation.
It's interesting because Johnson looked really annoyed about it, but yet didn't say anything about it. It was really weird. He walked away and sort of looked dejected. And I wonder if that has a sort of impact going forward. Do you know what I mean? Because he had the opportunity to complete his hat-trick. He is the top scorer. I mean, maybe he should have shown some more sort of personality and gone and taken the ball and placed it down. Listening to Troy Deeney last night, he was saying, there should not even be a discussion about that. He should just go over there, pick it up. Son's not on the pitch, whack it down, take it, finish off the hat-trick and walk away. Again, it's sort of that, I don't know, it's just, there's not enough conviction. There's not enough sort of desire to go and finish the job off. And I'm not criticising Brennan Johnson. I just think that's the nature of where we are, maybe even as a society, that, sometimes you are allowed to say, no, hold on a second. I need to take the lead here, put this down and go. Whereas he sort of almost deferred to a teenager.
It's a delicate one, that, because certainly I've been very critical of players earlier in the season. There was that Chelsea thing with Noni Madueke and
yeah, but that was ridiculous.
Yeah. But I always think with penalties, I get the situation's changed because Johnson scored a couple of goals, right? So suddenly he's on a hat-trick and you wouldn't have necessarily thought that he might have been. But I just think that's always got to be a coach's call. I get it about players wanting, I want that penalty. I'm all for players backing themselves, especially once they've been given the green light to take the spot kick. But I just think players arguing about, and he didn't argue here, but that should always be down to the coach.
Or the
Gaffer,
captain.
who's taking the pen. That simple as that. Who's taking the pen? You are, or he is. That's it. Like I've always felt that with penalties. I've always found it really nonsensical when you've got players arguing about a pen. Look at the coach. He decides. It's over.
Yeah, possibly that should have been the case. It wasn't a great performance. Wasn't a great game. Spurs had 4 corners and 8 shots on target against the worst team in the land, one of the worst teams to ever play Premier League football. We could go into details about Southampton. We sort of dissected them on the Sunday session yesterday. But Crook had this brilliant quote that he came out with from Rasmus Ankersen when he took over the club. It was this:
"If it ain't broke, consider breaking it." Well, congratulations, Rasmus Ankersen and Sport Republic. You have definitely managed to break Southampton. The way that club has been run since they came in has been an absolute sham. And I don't think it's on the owner, Dragan Solak. I know that Jim White has got quite close to him and he's a successful businessman, an ambitious guy. Clearly it wasn't part of his master plan to get relegated twice in 3 Premier League seasons, but he's put his faith in the wrong people. The recruitment has been poor. The way they've chopped and changed different styles of manager, it's played a massive part in their downfall. I think even Juric, probably alongside Ruud van Nistelrooy, will go down as one of the worst appointments in Premier League history. They deserve relegation, and I'm not sure they're going to bounce straight back this time either.
Yeah, that's a key thing. And we were speaking to Saints fans last night, and that was one of the questions that I posed, because what direction do you go in? He is completely opposite to Russell Martin, right? Russell Martin, possession-based coach, wants you to play the ball through the thirds and create opportunities with overloads and moving the ball around nicely. Whether you agree with that or don't agree with that, I'm sure if you've built a squad for it, the next move you make shouldn't be to completely change the style and have someone who doesn't really want the ball, but wants full heavy metal, high pressing, man marking all over the field and just up and at them, full on running you into the ground. I mean, it's a complete gear change and so nonsensical. It is so baffling that a Premier League team that, as Kevin has already illustrated, is part of a £1 billion industry, but is not being run like a £1 billion industry. And that is one of the other major problems. There's no clear thought about what's happening next. So he's had them training in ridiculous ways. Your man Flynn Downs, who's one of the key players that they had last season, has fallen out with him, and he's not the only one. So watch this space as to what happens next there. Let's move on to the Manchester derby, which was about as enjoyable as wearing a damp pair of socks. United only managed to muster 2 shots on target in what was a fruitless game, but I think they were the better team and could have won it. If they had a bit more cutting edge, City were there for the taking, Crook.
Yeah, they were. I was really disappointed by City, and I was listening to our colleague Henry Winter driving up to Manchester on his show on Sunday morning saying that he fancied City because, quote, they're on a roll. I don't see that, particularly away from home. It's 12 points from the last 12 now on the road. Their only wins have come against Leicester, Ipswich and Tottenham, so no great shakes there.
You didn't tell him that, though, when you sat next to him for most of the afternoon, though, did you? You didn't bring that up with him.
But I thought it looked an aged Manchester City side. We thought it looked a Man City side that lacked pace when the team sheets were handed in. And that's exactly what happened. And I thought United probably dominated the midfield battle. They had some really good turnovers of possession, whereby with better decision-making in the final third, they would have created more opportunities. I think what summed it up for me was that the Dalot cross that Garnacho's tried to head and it ends up hitting him on the chest and he falls over in a heap. And that really encapsulated the lack of quality from both teams in the final third. City had a couple of shots from distance that Onana saved for the cameras, but they never really looked like scoring. And the big issue for United is the top end of the pitch. You know, not just the number 9, but I thought Højlund was really disappointing. As tends to happen, Xerxes comes off the bench and provides a bit of spark, but he doesn't seem to be able to do that when he starts games. Garnacho isn't an inverted forward. He wants to go out wide. He did that a bit more, actually, yesterday. And again, Kev will testify at Sporting that the 2 number 10s, Amorim liked to play with one winger who would naturally gravitate towards the touchline. That happened a little bit. Bruno Fernandes was United's best player, but it's a big concern, the lack of goals. He admitted that to me afterwards, Amorim. He said it's becoming a major issue. They've got to get a proper number 9 in the summer window. And I've said this, and again, it goes back to my gripe about data and clubs trying to sign young players with sell-on value. Don't mess about with that. Just get someone who's proven himself. You know he's going to put the ball in the back of the net. I don't care if you're not going to get any money back for him. You can't take a chance on number 9. I'd sign Victor Osimhen. I think he's the cheapest option available. I think he will score goals in the Premier League. Go and get him.
37 goals they've scored this season, Manchester United. They have a -4 goal difference. Could be the second successive season that I have a minus goal difference. It has been a problem for ages. Let's not pretend that it's a new thing. It's been going on for 2 or 3 seasons. When they finished in the top 6, when they finished in the Champions League places not so long ago, they were the lowest scorers in the top 6. So it's been something that has been a millstone around their neck for a long time. I wish that a penalty was given to Manchester United in the first few minutes of that game, Kevin, because we would have seen a different match, wouldn't we, if that had been the case. I think the contact was just outside the penalty area when Garnacho goes towards the box. But it's really close, and you could argue that contact continued into the penalty area. I think for the game, it would have just been a lot better if we'd had a penalty there and United had gone in front.
Yeah, and I think it would have brought City out a bit. But I agree. I commentated on City's game against Leicester in midweek, and Leicester were absolutely atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Didn't lay a glove on Manchester City at any stage. And it was almost too easy for them. But what was really noticeable was they just fell into those old patterns of quite slow possession and just not really moving the pieces around. And in the second half, that vim, that vigour, that rhythm, and that carried through to Old Trafford. I think it was interesting, Pep Guardiola talking about positions and talking about his players not quite taking up the right positions to open up space. But that lack of dynamism in that team, apart from Marmoush, I have to say, is a real problem. because they're just not moving the pieces around enough. They're just not opening up gaps in teams. And, I can forgive it with United because I feel like they're on a journey, but it feels to me that Nico Gonzalez is the start of that midfield rebuild, but it has a lot more to go because Ilkay Gundogan, for example, who I think is a brilliant player, I've been a huge fan of his for years, but time creeps up on everyone and his legs have gone. He can't cover the ground in the same way. It's why De Bruyne is going. De Bruyne, one of the great players of his generation, absolutely phenomenal player, but he can't cover the ground in the way that he did. He can't make those bursts in midfield in the way that he did. That's just time. That's just inevitability. And they've got to keep rebuilding. They are nowhere near where they need to be, but they know that.
I mean, at one stage yesterday, it had Casemiro in midfield, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne, Ilkay Gundogan, Mateo Kovacic. I mean, all we needed was old Eriksen to come off the bench and get involved as well, and we would have had a vets game. I mean, it was such a one-paced midfield, wasn't it? I mean, it does strike you as strange that the team that he picked at Pep Guardiola, bearing in mind it was such, again, narrow forwards, bearing in mind that they play against a team with wing-backs that like to get forward and there could be gaps down the sides. I was so surprised that Doku and Savinho didn't start that game. As I was surprised against Bournemouth the week before. But Crook's not sure about Nico Gonzalez, are you? Got a little bit of a bit worried about him. You're hearing whispers.
No, I was just told that Man City haven't been entirely convinced with his performances since he come in. But it's difficult when you come from a foreign league mid-season. So I think we'll reserve judgment. What I am sure about is it feels like a long way back for Manchester City in terms of getting back to the heights that they've hit in recent seasons. It looks like a massive rebuild job. Kev's mentioned a few there. It wouldn't surprise me if Bernardo Silva during the Exodus. I think John Stones has only got a year left on his contract. How many more games is he going to play in a Manchester City shirt? Kyle Walker has already gone. We know that De Bruyne is heading for the exit. So they've got a massive job on their hands. And how do you replace players of that calibre? I know they're going to spend tens, hundreds of millions of pounds, but there's no guarantee, is there? And, we were asked by our colleagues on the website yesterday, well, who are they targeting to replace De Bruyne? Lucas Paquetá is one name that's been mentioned to me if this court case goes his way. It's a different type of player. And, I'm not sure you can put him on the same level as Kevin De Bruyne at this moment in time.
Interesting to see what happens next. Let's move on. Aston Villa 2, Nottingham Forest 1. This is a proper game of football. I absolutely loved this match. Villa dominant for the first half of the game, especially the first half an hour of the match. I thought they set up wrong, Nottingham Forest. They went with the back five. That allowed Tielemans just to basically boss the midfield, and he is so good, Kev. He is so good.
He's a sensational player. I mean, he was for Leicester, but I think he's even, under Emery, maybe even gone on a step. He's the player that we always thought he was going to become when he came through as a teenager at Anderlecht. He was a real wow player. And then he ended up at Monaco and it didn't really work. And you thought, as he peaked too soon, is this going to work for him? And then he's come to England and been, as I say, sensational for Leicester. And then it's the intelligence. He's got the technical quality, we know that, but he's always got such a picture of what's around him. I think in that more advanced role, it really suits him because he can cut teams apart. And it was a really interesting game. I actually thought Forest should have got something out of it. I thought they made enough chances in the second half to actually get a point. But they started so poorly. I think you're absolutely right. I think the setup wrong. I think 3 centre-backs didn't work. Interesting, Daniel Marlon scored a couple of goals because he is by nature, if you look at his history, very streaky player. So that could suit them really well over the next few weeks. If he hits one of those streaks, obviously not in the Champions League because he's not been registered, but if he hits one of those streaks in the Premier League, that could really help them.
Yeah, finishing was the difference, right? Rodgers, superb. Marlon, have you already mentioned? Forest had a lot of chances, but just couldn't convert them, Crook.
Yeah, and obviously they didn't have a number 9, did they? No Chris Wood or Awoniyi available, and I think you saw just how important it is for Nuno and this team to have a focal point. So I think that was definitely a factor. It was always going to catch up with Forest in the end. They've had such a brilliant season, still having a brilliant season. Obviously got an FA Cup semi-final to look forward to, and if Man City play at Wembley like they did yesterday at Old Trafford, then you've got to say Forest have got a huge chance of going through. And I think they've got enough of a gap as well. I'm just looking at the table now. I know that City and Chelsea have got games in hand, but and Newcastle as well. But there's a nice cushion there for Forest, and I think it'd be really unfair if they were to drop out at this late stage. But Villa have hit their straps at the perfect time, haven't they? 7 wins in a row. Massive game for them live on talkSPORT in Paris in midweek. PSG inevitably crowned French champions at the weekend. I looked at it, actually. They've lost 1 game since November, and that was the game they didn't deserve to lose in the first leg of their last 16 tie against Liverpool. So it's a tall order, but they couldn't be in finer fettle, Aston Villa. And I do think they're going to go on now and get a place in the top 5. I think them and Newcastle, providing Newcastle get the job done against Leicester tonight, will qualify for the Champions League. And that will mean Chelsea, I think, missing out.
We've talked a lot about data and smart recruitment. I think that January window is a great example of what you can do. And I think Unai Emery's driven a lot of that, has a lot of respect for Asensio. Asensio wasn't quite happening for him at Paris. He was one of the odd men out there. That happens if you've got a really strong squad. But look at the experience. He's got Real Madrid. He's won everything there is to win. And he's come in and has just lifted that level, scoring lots of goals, making goals as well. But just his behaviour in training, his experience in big games. Rashford's come in, been revitalised. And then that just lifts everybody else. Marlon as well. It just lifts everybody else because then there's competition. Then you can rotate a bit better. And they've brought in not guys who need 50, 60, 70 games to get up to speed. They've brought in guys in a kind of win now mode, if you like. So that's been an example of a really superb January window, I think.
Just to go back a step, Crook has suggested that Aston Villa and Newcastle will get into the Champions League. Are you saying Manchester City won't?
Yeah, I think I am. Yeah, it just strikes to me that there's a bit of an apathy in that team, and you saw that from their performance because their standards have dropped so dramatically. Subconsciously, I'm not sure the motivation is there to get enough points between now and the end of the season.
Interesting. We could have 6 teams in the Champions League next year, of course, because 5 almost guaranteed now. 6 would be granted if Aston Villa were to win the Champions League and finish outside the top 5. I think it pushes down as well. But either way, there is a possibility of getting 6 teams in the Champions League. Unlikely, but it is a possibility. Quick word on Ipswich against Wolves. Ipswich have had a bad season. I mean, they've largely got away with many sort of fingers pointing at them and any sort of criticism because of Leicester and Southampton being absolutely abysmal. But they too have struggled. It's almost like they do this every week, Kev. They go ahead or they look as if they're going to get something out of the game, but they just can't last the course. Yeah,
there's a bit of naivety in there, I think. I think they make a lot of individual errors. That's what struck me over the course of the season with them. And also just squad strength as well. I mean, what really jumped out to me from that game, a player I really, really like, actually, Pablo Sarabia, who scores one and makes the other. Now, he's a guy that, when you talk about Wolves and you talk about their top players, he wouldn't be anywhere near the players you probably mentioned. But there's a guy, if you look at his CV, he's played for big clubs, he's won big things, has real quality, and they don't have that. And why would they have that? Because they were in League One 2 seasons ago. So why would they have that? I know they've spent a lot. But if you're competing against, arguably the 4th worst team in the league, and they could just come out with Sarabia out of nowhere to win a game for them, that's what you're up against.
Yeah, indeed. They will go down. So will Leicester and Southampton, 3 teams that are promoted from the Championship, going back down for the 2nd successive season. Another reason for us to moan and whinge. It does feel like we're whinging and moaning a little bit today, doesn't it, Crook? We've been a little the grumpy old men of the Premier League. We're just a bit disappointed, I think, that we're not having an exciting end to the season because there's still 7 games to go for most teams. And for other teams, there are 9 games to go, like Newcastle United.
Yeah, but listen, I think it's been a poor season. It's in terms of the quality, overall quality of the Premier League. There have been some great stories. The fact Forest look like they might be bringing Champions League football back to the City ground is fantastic for them. Villa competing for a Champions League place in an FA Cup semi-final, still in the Champions League. Brilliant story for them as well. Bournemouth have given us some great moments, although I think they're going to miss out on Europe. Same for Brighton. But the fact there's not really been a relegation race, I think we've known since November the 3 promoted teams will go down, has been a disappointment. And we haven't had a title race, and that's as much on Arsenal as anybody else, because it felt like it was there for them this season. They've just drawn too many games. They don't lose very often, but they don't win enough. And this reminds me a little bit of the year that Leicester won the league. And I'm not comparing Liverpool to Leicester. Obviously, Liverpool are a much better team, but so many of those big teams have fallen by the wayside that it's been a procession. And we don't want to see that. But as one of our TV colleagues said yesterday, we can't have the dramatic final day of the season title race every year. It makes us appreciate it more when we have those kind of moments.
It wouldn't be special if it happened every single May, would it? But the raw facts of this...
Can we put an asterisk next to Liverpool, though, Kev? Just like when they went behind closed doors.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You mentioned, just talking about the relegation teams just very quickly, mentioned Leicester. Can I just wave the flag for data a little bit? Because hiring Ruud van Nistelrooy is a great example of what happens if you just junk the data and just go, he's good, I've heard of him, let's hire him. It hasn't really worked out for them.
And as much as you can point the finger at Ruud van Nistelrooy, I mean, there's another 11 at least fingers to point at some of the participants in that Leicester team who may have been hired by some sort of data, but don't look as if they're living up to it. The data, and it's pretty raw data, is this, that with 7 games to go, Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton are at least 12 points behind 17th place Wolverhampton Wanderers. That is abysmal. At the top of the table, the other thing that we're interested in titles and relegation, right? That's the main thing we should be interested in. And at the top of the table, there is 11 points between the top team and the second team, just to illustrate the Crookmeister's point. Kev, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on the programme. Crookie
Pleasure,
baby,
as always.
Thank you very much. We'll see you on Thursday.